Hello friends, I'm Kayla. Welcome back to my channel. This is the vlog where I'm going to be rereading the entire, oh my god, Wayward Children series. You try to do a smooth intro and then it just flops. This is what I'm reading this weekend. I'm going to try to read them all. No, I am going to read them all in 72 hours. If you for some reason have no idea what this series is, I'll talk about it obviously throughout this video, but I read the first book in the series, Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, the month it came out in 2016. And Tor has kindly, the publisher, my favorite publisher, has sent me an arc of every single book since every January. I read it every January. I give it 5 stars every January. So I have the latest one right here, Lost in the Moment and Found. Every story kind of follows a different character, a different world. Sometimes they exist in this like home world, the children come together. But I thought I would reread the entire thing before this new one because it's been a while. I think when the third one came out, I reread the first 2 before this one. When this one came out, I again reread these 2 first. But I haven't reread any of these since like 2020, and some of them I have absolutely never reread, so I thought it would be fun. I'm just getting to talk through all of them for the first time all together. I put a little poll in my community tab where you voted that I do spoilers for this. So I will make sure when I talk about spoilers, there's a little border around the edge so you know that that's happening for each book. I really credit this series for making me a novella girl, for making me a portal fantasy girl. I think it's the longest time I've ever been committed to a series, and I just love predicting who the next story is going to be featuring, what world we're going to be in. I have some buddy reads going. We're going to do some live reading sprints with my channel members and some other friends of mine who are reading it this weekend. I believe the first time I read this, I actually gave it 4 stars, so let's throw it back to 2016 Kayla and see what she thought. This story is about people, mostly children, finding doorways to other fantastical worlds. I loved how unique it was, and I loved the magical worlds and the explanations of everything. It was such a diverse cast of characters, which I really appreciated. We had an asexual protagonist. We had a transgender roommate. I really liked the mystery element. It's something I wasn't expecting, but it definitely drove the storyline. And I liked the length. It was under 200 pages. I think it was an appropriate size. My 1 star taken off would be, I don't want to call it confusing, but it took a long time, honestly, for me to really grasp what was happening. The main things I remember about reading this for the first time is I remember it was a murder mystery, which nobody really talked about because I think everyone's just trying to pitch the series and talk about how it's portal fantasy and how there's this home, but there's also all of these worlds, and like that's enough. So also talking about how there is a tragedy that takes place and like the kids are kind of solving it. That was just an unnecessary plot point, but that's what made me like this book so much, and on reread made me appreciate it a lot. And then also I remember it being like a little bit darker than I was expecting because I remember people struggling with how to categorize this age-wise because the characters are younger. Also, it's novellas, so it just feels like a younger middle grade series, especially with the way you pitch it, or YA, but it's definitely appropriate for older audiences. I don't even know technically the designation, if it's just like fiction, but it's not dark enough that teen audiences that can't read it or shouldn't read it, or that it wouldn't be marketed towards them. This first book is 170 pages, so I'll get like 100 pages in and talk to you about it. Right now, I have a little bit of time to read because Liam has a tournament this weekend. It's our home tournament. He had a tournament out of town last weekend with his Pee-wee team, and they lost spectacularly. This weekend is his home team, and he got invited onto the Bantam team this year, which is the age above him. That team's going great, and he's having a lot of fun, and we have that tournament, so hopefully I'm expecting it to go better. He didn't go to school today. It's currently Friday. So I guess like noon Friday, this whole thing is kicking off, and I have until noon on Monday is when my 72 hours are up. But he didn't go to school because he had practice this morning at 6 a.m. That was fun. And now he has a game at noon. And then he has 3 tomorrow and 1 probably on Sunday, maybe 2. So right now he's just in his warm up. I'm going to start this and then watch the game, and then I'll check in with you.
That's your side.
Hello, it's suddenly so late. I'm getting through this so much slower than I figured because I'm taking very detailed notes. I don't know why, but I just feel like anytime I want to read the next book in the series, I should have this entire page in my bullet journal where I describe every single character, the world that they come from, what happens to them in the book, and what else? Their physical description. As if I am responsible for writing the like Wikipedia pages for each of these characters. I'm sure that already exists out there, but I wanted to do it. It's fun. Actually, the funnest thing is how much I have forgotten about this series. I can remember the vibes. I can remember the overall storyline and how these characters are connected, but I could not have told you the multiple tragedies, who they happened to in the book. So even though this was probably my 4th or 5th time reading this, I was surprised by who something bad just happened to. How that happened to me in one of my favorite series, couldn't tell you. I've been highlighting a little bit. So in the first book, we're following Nancy, and she is the perfect protagonist to be learning this story through. So you have someone who's new to the school, and there's a bunch of established characters and friendships and relationships, but the new girl needs everything introduced to her. So a good portion of this book is people telling her about all of these magical worlds. Because the thing about all of these kids is they're also isolated. It's not like there's this magical world that everybody on Earth accepts. It's like you find this door, you enter this world, and then you come back to the real world and nobody believes you. And once you go to this school, it's like this found family and everyone's like, oh yeah, let me tell you about my world. And the way that it describes itself, I don't think is a spoiler, like you find this out yourself. Here in the real world, there's like north, south, east, and west. But in the other magical portal worlds, it's nonsense, logic, wickedness, and virtue. But the whole idea of it is that it's your perfect place. So maybe if I grew up with a certain unstable family environment, I would find my portal world would be a world full of logic. It has very distinct rules, and I know all of the expectations on me when I wake up in the morning. Meanwhile, the kid next door may find a portal to a world completely different, but that's what they needed. That's the world that was calling to them, that made them feel safe and happy and was their true home. Anyway, what's fun about this is you learn about these little worlds, but not in great detail, but you do learn about Nancy and the world that she comes from. And hers is so fascinating because it's the halls of the dead, and there are certain things that she has to do while she's there, like remain very still a lot of the time. And the quote I really like is, all those days of stillness had made her muscles strong, accustomed to supporting her weight for hours at a time. Some people thought only motion bred strength. Those people were wrong. The mountain was as powerful as the tide. I also loved how we're talking about gender in here. This is what I loved the first time as well. Eleanor's home has so many more girls than boys, and Nancy asks why, and it gets described to her as boys will be boys as a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're too loud on the whole to be easily misplaced or overlooked. When they disappear from home, parents send search parties to dredge them out of the swamps and drag them from their frog ponds. It's not innate, it's learned, but it protects them from the doors, keeps them safe at home. And there are just multiple moments in here that are about that, like learned behavior, ways that people are raised, ways that the world views people differently. We have a trans character in this book, and he is the one who like everybody wants the book for. Like if you're in the fandom, it's very much like everyone cannot wait for his book, and Shannon has said that's how the series is going to end, is with his book, but we have no idea how many books there are going to be in the series, and that's what's so fun about it. There could literally be 50, because in this one we met 7 characters who felt pretty distinct, like we learned a lot of their backstory, and then there was 5 or 6 other characters who we just learned the names of and a little bit about their world, but barely anything. It was just like, oh, that's Seraphina. She's so beautiful. She comes from the world of this. Oh, that's that boy over there who doesn't even get named. He's from the land of the mole people. Getting into spoilers really quick, just for those of you who, I don't know, I feel like maybe you'll come back to this video when you want to be reminded of the series, but there are 3 deaths in the book, and I forgot. I really forgot. I think it's because we do revisit some of these characters, and now I can't remember if it's flashbacks or if it's like alternate dimensions or what's going on. But the people who die in this book are Sumi, who is Nancy's roommate, and the person who killed Sumi took her hands. And then throughout the book, you learn that the person who killed these 3 people, who I'll spoil, is Jill. Jack and Jill are twins, and they're the ones in the next book. So I'm so excited to read that. That is my favorite book in the series, I think, at this point. And then after Sumi died, it was L'Oreal, who I didn't even remember. And she died and they took her eyes. And then the 3rd person that died was Lundy. We definitely learned some things, like some different connections later, but we do get Lundy's book in the series. She's the one who goes to the goblin market. So all 3 of them die, and then we meet a couple other characters. There's Christopher, who we meet, and he like plays this little bone flute and like sings to skeletons. And at the end of the book, Nancy is like going home for vacation, but she finds a door and goes like back into her magical world. Jack and Jill, so Jack finds out her twin is the one who killed all these people, and she decides to support her and take her back to their magical world. So they're off. And then I love how the book ended because we find out that Cade is related to Eleanor West. It's like his great-great-great aunt. And it says something so nice at the end about how Cade is going to take over Lundy's role as like the therapist of the school, and also he's eventually going to be responsible for the entire school and it's going to get passed down to him. So that's really beautiful. Anyway, I wish I had put this on a tripod instead of holding it up. I wasn't planning on filming that long of a clip. I also wasn't planning on finishing the book before checking in with you at all, but my day has gone a little bit off the rails. So I'll see you tomorrow. I have to plan a book club live show, and then I think I'm gonna do reading sprints, and I need to check in with my group chats about my read, and then I'll read book 2. So see you tomorrow. All right, it is Saturday afternoon. I kicked off the day doing my live show for this, and now I'm live with my friend Megan and Bree and their patrons on their Patreon and my channel members, and we're all reading this series together. I don't think either one of them is vlogging their experience, but Bree's voice note was my favorite.
Oh my God, book 2 was a banger! That's 5 stars. That's 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, I'm about to start rapping. Wow, not only did you take us on this beautiful journey, you also let us know how fucked up gender norms are, and conforming, and how people are grooming, what that looks like. Oh, book 2 was so good. How do I come back from that? Lala, you did that.
So in this first sprint, I got to about 60 pages in. I'm listening to the audiobook because this is the book in the series I have read the most amount of times. I'm not taking any notes. I just wanted to listen to the story, and Shauna McGuire is the one who narrates it, so that's fun. I think every book in the series is narrated by somebody different, which I didn't realize. And I just love that this is the story we get after the first book. So there are many characters you are intrigued about that you meet in the first story, and you learn about their magical world. So like Nancy came from the halls of the dead, Sumi came from confection, Jack and Jill came from the moors, Cade came from fairyland, Lundy came from the goblin market, and all of these different worlds we're going to learn about in the entire series. And Jack and Jill as twins, they're so different, and in the first book, the journey that they go on, it's just really interesting. So interesting that it makes a lot of sense that this is the story that we follow as the second book in the series. I feel like Jack and Jill are the most intriguing characters, and they're introduced to us as such different people in this book. But the thing about this is we meet them when they are children and they haven't gone to their magical world yet, and their parents are raising them to be so different, but in a different way than they are in this one. And you just want to know how they end up being who they are, the relationship that they have, the tension between them. How did they get here? And this story tells us all about it, how their parents raised them with these such rigid roles. Their dad at one point says that having a strong daughter is better than having a weak son. So he has a lot of expectations of what his son would be, and he just selects one of his daughters to place all of those expectations and gender norms onto. And it's so interesting to think that when I first read this, like my kid was 6 or 7, and now he is the same age as Jack and Jill. So seeing the world through their eyes and the ways that they interpret things and the understanding that they come to have as such young girls, it's just interesting seeing like how Liam's mental capacity is similar, and I'm really enjoying the audiobook. So I'll check in with you soon. All right, I'm finished with Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I feel like so much of what I thought, like my memory of this, was actually my memory of reading Come Tumbling Down, because we learn more about the moors, which is where the girls go, and the scientist and the kind of vampire situation in this one. But also in this one, we have other kids from the school in the story. I didn't have any new takeaways. The quotes that I loved the first time and my takeaways the first time were the same. I just love the storytelling and I love the atmosphere. I just can't believe how much got packed into such a short story. Also, there's a sapphic relationship in here, but the synopsis itself really just talks about their real life and not about the world that they enter. So I think talking any further would be bad, but I'm absolutely keeping my 5-star. Getting into spoilers, I actually don't really have much. I really like Jack's relationship with Alexis. There was some intensity near the end. There is a lot of telling and not showing, which people complain about, but I love it. The master vampire situation is very ominous and uncomfortable because she is like, I want the master to, like, I want to be the master's daughter, but it can't be till I'm 18. And then there's this choker to wear, and it's all just very like uncomfortable and this feeling of dread. I loved it a lot, and I'm interested to see what the heck I think of this one, because this was my least favorite, even though I still give it 5 stars when I read it, and I've never reread it, so that'll be fun. Anything to update you with in real life? I got 2 packages today. A Libro FM mug. This was like a Christmas present that came a little bit late, which is fine. I got a sticker. I'm an affiliate. If you want the best audiobook service ever, there's a link down below to my affiliate link because I adore Libro FM. And then I got this package, which I don't know, or I do know it's a book, but I've never heard of it. So a big marketing package for someone who didn't have this on their TBR. And I just opened it like that far, and yeah, there's like moss. It looks like mold, and I just don't know why they would do this, but there's some little cards. I guess these are the characters. Beautiful art. And then I think this is a candle with a terribly done label on it, but smells like trees. Fraser and Fir Needle. I mean, I'll burn it. A Ruinous Fate. I got dice. And then here's the book. Absolutely stained by moss. It's also definitely wet, but there's a map. That is a beautiful, beautiful color. And yeah, now my bed is just covered in this. So interesting choice as opposed to packing peanuts. I wonder if I can compost this. Is it actually a plant, or is it, oh my God, that's a bug. Ah, oh, no. Okay, well, everything is green. I'm gonna read the next book. Fantastic news. I am in fact enjoying this more than I think I did the first time. So that's very fun. And I think it's probably because of reading the entire series and knowing what's to come and knowing these characters better later that this story is just more enjoyable. I think the first time I read it, it was like, okay, all of these characters are coming together. We're introducing new people, but we're still in Eleanor West's home. If you don't know, essentially every other book in the series is set in the home with all of these kids, and then every other story is set in a magical world. So this one we're back at Eleanor's home, but they pretty much immediately go on a quest. I'm halfway through, and we've had like characters recurring. We've got Cade still, we've got Nancy, we've got Christopher, and also in this book introduces Cora. And the first time I read it, I didn't love Cora, but I did love her when she gets her own book. So I'm feeling her out right now. We'll see. But the thing about spoilers is, like, some people might consider the synopsis itself to be a spoiler and should be included in the spoiler section if you wouldn't read this before reading the first 2 books. We'll call it a spoiler because it does talk about something that happens in the first book. So in this book, we are following Rinny, who shows up at the home, and she is Sumi's daughter. Now, Sumi died in the first book as like a teenage girl. She didn't have a daughter. And the whole thing is the world that they come from, Sumi and her daughter, is a world of nonsense. Meanwhile, Eleanor West's home is obviously in the world of logic. I'm so sorry if you can hear my husband. Maybe I should wait until I've finished it and he's done with his video games. So Rinny's objective coming here is to find her mother. So maybe if all the kids work together and they go through some different portals together, they can somehow find Sumi. And like, why not? We've got Christopher, who can like sing to the dead, and we have a girl who is living in the halls of the dead, so they've got a chance. I finished this pretty late last night, and now we're back at the rink for the last game of the tournament. Hopefully it goes well, because they haven't been so far. I also started In an Absent Dream, and I'm excited to talk about this. So this one I'm giving a 5-star. It's definitely the book that I remember it to be, but I appreciate it more than I did back in the day. Of all the worlds that we visit throughout the series, this one makes sense that it's called Beneath the Sugar Sky, and then we end up in Confection. And from there, we're just on this journey of finding this person. And that takes a little bit more effort than you might think, because there are like pieces they kind of need to put together. This is definitely not a starting point in the series. Some people say you can start with Down Among the Six Bones. You can come in at Across the Green Grass Fields. This is not one of those. Like, this very much continues the story that happened in book 1. We also get introduced to new characters who we might see in future books. I can't remember. There's a baker in Confection named Layla. I can't remember if we see her in future books, but I have a feeling we might get her as a prominent character later, because they talk about how she might come to Eleanor West's home someday. Spoilers, as far as what Rini brings to the story, she has like this kind of device that helps them move through portals more so than they ever knew was possible before. But then I think they lose it pretty quickly. But they do end up putting Sumi back together. So we find out that Christopher had kept Sumi's hands like in his room, and then they have to like get her shadow and her something else and put her kind of back together. We have a character named Nadia who basically trades herself for Sumi's shadow so they can put Sumi back together. And Nadia is an interesting character. She's kind of like Cora, as in she comes from a very watery world, and that's why they connect in this story. So Nadia sacrifices herself to, I think it's the Lord of the Dead, where Nancy is, because they go meet up with Nancy and they're all back together, and then they find Sumi, and then everything's great at the end. This book leaves you with enough questions, but in a nice enough place that you can move on to a completely unrelated story next and not feel like you're waiting to learn something else that happened. What I want to say about In an Absent Dream, I probably remember this one least. I know it's Lundy's story, but I don't really remember what happens with Lundy. Lundy is the therapist at the school in the first book, but she presents as like 8 years old because she is stuck. She's like in eternal childhood. And in here, she starts out being 6 and then 8, and then something's going to happen. Her magical door is going to open and she's stopped. And what I'll say about this is it is the best written of the series, like in order that I'm reading so far. It has absolutely beautiful descriptions as far as Lundy herself. It introduces her as Catherine Victoria Lundy, pretty and patient and practical, not lonely because she had never really considered any way of being other than alone. Not gregarious nor sullen, but somewhere in the middle. Happy to speak when spoken to, happy also to carry on in silence, keeping her thoughts tucked quietly away. She was ordinary, she was remarkable. Of such commonplace contradictions are weapons made. Catherine Lundy walked in the world. That was quite enough to set everything else into motion. Like, what a beautiful end to the first chapter. It really sets the scene. Her childhood is one of not having any friends because her father's the principal of the school and people don't want to interact with her. But the whole point is these kids, you know, aren't happy in their home lives. And so they go to these magical worlds. And sometimes the magical worlds are like their perfect place as far as a place that they feel safe and secure and is the opposite of their real life. But there also is definitely the feeling of these worlds are not as good as the children assume them to be, because, you know, they don't have the cognitive ability to really recognize danger. Just because the danger looks different than what it did in reality doesn't mean that it is actually their perfect place. So them wanting to go back to these worlds, sometimes that's not actually probably what's best for them. I don't think we've had any grand revelations like that in the stories. It's more the reader kind of takeaway. So gonna go watch hockey, read more of In an Absent Dream. I know Meg is doing reading sprints soon, so I'll probably just like be in the chat because she's also reading the same book as me. We're at the exact same pace, though she is 8 hours ahead in the world. Here's the update. Liam won his game. They really needed it. Boosted morale. Went very well. Was very fun to watch. I think it was 4-3 by the end, and it was 3-3 for a while. It was 2-2 for a while. Like, it's really neck and neck, and they crushed it. And that's my update. My update on the book. This is my favorite of the first 4. And I think that this actually is a good entry point for the series because I don't think any characters really got introduced in here besides Lundy and the people in her magical world. And then at the end, she meets Eleanor West and you learn all about Lundy's story like in here. And one thing that's fun that gets introduced is the not idea of like other generations being in this world, because obviously anybody can go to these magical worlds. But I think it was fun to establish in here how long the portal worlds have been in existence, because Lundy learns that somebody else with her name has been in this portal world before. So then in just looking at this series, it could, like, she really, I know I said this before, but she could really take it so far. This could turn into a historical fiction series. What I would actually categorize this as, would I call it cozy fantasy? I don't think so. I would call it lighter fantasy for sure, but there are deaths. There are stakes. To me, like, it feels like reading this fits into my cozy fantasy era, but it's not quite proper. Actually, let me apologize for how much I've been using era. Like, I get it. Is getting annoying. It's kind of like when people started saying aesthetic, like that's so aesthetic, even though it's not the proper way to use that word, but then you can't stop. That's me with era. What was I gonna say? Oh, also, while I'm here, let me apologize while I'm apologizing. Oh, in my apology era, for the moss, because I do think that the moss was a better idea. Like, it's eco-friendly. If I had any outdoor space or I kept a terrarium or something, I would have appreciated the moss. So I don't want to be mean about the moss. Anyway, this was 5 stars. I really liked Lundy getting introduced to her world, and it's all about fair value, which you come to learn. It's a world where it's almost, you have to be really careful with your language. And it's like when you make a wish in other stories, and like the wish can easily go awry if you word it incorrectly. That's kind of what it's like in this world, in the Goblin Market. 5 stars, absolutely incredible. Spoilers, let's talk about, what do we want to talk about? Moon as a character is very interesting in here. So Lundy meets Moon, and Moon introduces Lundy to this magical world. And Lundy, I think it's because like she hasn't had friends in real life. So this is her moment to make a friend in this magical world. So she kind of goes along with whatever Moon says. And she starts taking on Moon's fees. So every time you make a mistake, you get closer and closer to a bird. Like, there's a transformation aspect to this. So you lose your humanity the more like mistakes you made, and you go into debt. And Lundy takes on Moon's debt and kind of saves her friend by the end. But one of the big moments at the end is where she gives up her friendship to save Moon, because she's incurred so much debt that the only way that she can save her friend from everything is to lose the friendship entirely. And that was really intense to read and sad. And then there's another person in here named Mockery, and I wonder, it's so interesting to think how Shannon is introducing these characters, who in her mind is important. I feel like so far Mockery, and the amount that Mockery got talked about in here, but we never met Mockery, like Mockery's gonna get a story one day. I also feel that way about Seraphina. I don't feel like Seraphina comes into any other stories. Maybe I'm wrong. There was also this implication of a girl who got pregnant at the school and then vanished. And I wonder if she's gonna end up in Eleanor West Home, or if she's somebody we already know. And then the biggest sacrifice she makes at the end is she takes the elixir for like stopping aging or whatever, and that is her big sacrifice. And she's like, okay, well, when do I get the potion to like pick up my aging back again? And the woman who's in charge of the whole thing, the heart of the Goblin Market, she's like, you don't, bitch. So now she's gonna end up at Eleanor West Home, and it's so great to think of her future as this therapist. But then like bad things happened to her in the first book. So her ending had a sad ending, but who knows? Nothing is ever really definite in the series, and so there's so much hope and thought for the future. Now we've got Come Tumbling Down. I have been humbled by this challenge. I don't know if anyone clicked this, Rob's doing dishes, if you can hear that. I don't know if anybody clicked this like thinking it would be just as much about the challenge as the series. In my mind, this video was just about the series, and I was giving this arbitrary number that I knew I wouldn't fail at as like the time period I was gonna read the series. I'm starting to grow concerned that I'm not gonna finish the series in these 72 hours. And obviously it doesn't matter, but with only 12 hours remaining and me going to bed for the next, I don't know, 7? I don't know if I can read the last 3 that quickly. So we'll see. What I'm thinking right now is I'm gonna get the audiobook of this. I remember this one pretty vividly. It's the Horse Girl book that I liked the least. It's the only book in the series I didn't give 5 stars. So I do think I'll just run through the audiobook as I'm like getting ready for bed, falling asleep. I don't know. As far as Come Tumbling Down though, 5 stars, absolutely. It's the 3rd book in like this storyline, so it's definitely in no way a starting point and would spoil like so much else that's happened. Much like this one, this is very much a quest, and it has all of the kids getting together and working towards something. There's unresolved stuff from Jack and Jill's situation, but also a lot of the kids are there and they're sacrificing things for each other. I call them kids. Everyone in Eleanor West home is between the ages of, is it 12 and 17 or 12 and 19? I don't know that I've ever actually read what's in the synopsis of this one. Yeah, okay, it's pretty vague. It just says, you know, Jack and Jill return. Oh my god, I'm so tired. Let's just get into spoilers. Like, I can't talk about anything else regarding this book. What did I jot down? Okay, in this book we talk about necromancy. There's a skeleton horse that's very interesting and frightening. Who did we meet in here? Alexis is in here, who was with it's confusing in this one because Jack is in Jill's body, and when she comes into the house, the kids like recognize her differently. Some of them recognize her being in the body and being like, oh, this is this person. But then some people are like, no, that's not them, because they can tell like their essence is the other twin. But Alexis came along with them, which is Jack's, is it Jack? Oh my god, what's wrong with me? It's Jack's like one true love. And the quest they go on and the thing they have to solve is like obviously getting them out of the same body, but also the twins, one of them was with the scientist and one of them was with the vampire master, and the scientist was killed, and so they want to bring him back. And by the end of the book, they do indeed bring him back, and he opens his eyes and he is there again. There's also this woman named Mary, this older woman in the moors, who I just feel like if we ever get flashbacks to historical stuff, maybe she'll pop up. Who else? There was this guy named Gideon. There's a high priest. Cora was in this book, and she like gave herself to the drowned gods, and she like showed up in this very spooky way and like spoke to them not as herself. Oh, and then Jack pushes Jill off the castle wall and like kills her. So that's a thing. Or is she really dead? Probably not. Is anybody ever really dead? Now we've got Across the Green Grass Fields. This is the story of Reagan. And Reagan is in the world of horses. So there's centaurs, kelpies, other magical, I still don't know how to pronounce equines. And this one kicks off, oh, I think it's called Hoofland that she's in. This kicks off with her having these best friends, and one of them is like mean to another one in the friend group and like kicks her out of the friend group, and Reagan just goes along with it. And then that girl shows up with her mom on her front door and is like, you don't want to be friends with my child anymore. You're a terrible person. I'm going to get you in trouble with your mom. And it's like this super embarrassing moment if you've ever had something like that happen. Anyway, my library has the audiobook of this one, so I'm gonna listen to it. I'll be done it by the time I talk to you next. I'm so tired. Okay, good night. I'm not regretting the challenge at all because I'm loving the series, but I'm getting concerned. Good morning. This is unfortunately the vibe today. It's so funny when I go to film and it's so gloomy and early out, but you wouldn't be able to tell. That's the one thing I'll give the ZV-1 credit for, is making it just look decent lighting all the time. It could definitely work on its color correction. Like when I film at night, I feel like it looks like trash compared to my old camera. But anyway, I'm reading this morning instead of washing my hair, which is what I should be doing. I will by the end of the day, but I can't afford to put any time into that because we only have a few hours to get all this done. I did finish this mostly last night, a little bit just right now, but I was at the drugstore last night and I thought maybe this would be a good option. It's dry conditioner, which I thought might be a better option than dry shampoo. The only dry shampoo that's ever worked for me, Dove, is just my ride or die, and it's been discontinued, pulled off the shelves because it's full of awful chemicals and is hurting people. Batiste is like the only one left, but it sucks. It sucks. I've tried it so many times over the years. It does not work for me and my hair. But maybe dry conditioner isn't the right thing either. Oh God, maybe it's not going to give me what I need. What I need is to wash my hair. I will, I promise, but I just need to do something in the meantime so you don't have to look at me looking like a wild animal. Speaking of wild animals, I gave this a 3. That smells so good. It's the same rating I gave it the first time. But I feel like I can forgive it. This was written in, I think, 2020 when the world was on fire. And this feels like a passion project. Because I follow Shauna Maguire and I know the things that she cares about and her love for My Little Pony, it felt like her. It felt like something just fun and silly to write. All of the centaurs and unicorns, they all have cute names and it's adorable, and it's just not for me. Reagan at the beginning of the book doesn't feel like she fits in. Her body is not progressing the same way as other girls she knows, and her parents let her in on the fact that she is intersex. They've been waiting a good amount of her life, planning this conversation, waiting for her to bring it up, until she was at a point where they felt like they could describe things to her in a way that she would understand. However, she ends up sharing that with her close friend who, as we know, isn't very nice. The reaction she gets is not welcoming. So this little world is perfect for her because it introduces her to this horse community who brings her in, and she just feels like it's her home, and then some things go awry. Yeah, that's all in the synopsis. It was fun to reread it, interesting to revisit, but for the books that take place in the other worlds, like especially coming off the heels of In an Absent Dream and the stunning writing, this just did not meet expectations. It didn't match it. What it did accomplish is being a good starting point for people. You could read this as a complete standalone and just enjoy Reagan, and it has good messages. So as far as spoilers, I don't think there are any characters really introduced that we will see in other books. Unless I'm forgetting someone, there was like Pansy, Chicory, and then Reagan at the end goes back to the real world. And the way that this fantasy world is perfect for her isn't that she needs to spend her entire life there. It's that it gave her exactly what she needed out of it at this point in her life. It gave her that warm and welcoming community, but also had people challenging her being there, but in like a safe kind of environment. So when she goes back to the real world, she just has more of a sense of self and can stand up to the people who throughout the rest of her life will challenge her identity and her belonging. Will she find her social circle? I think so, because I think many of us at such a young age could benefit from being shown love and support in another environment, and that could give us the confidence that we need. We're all so impressionable, and little things can impact us so greatly, good or bad. So I really think it was a good story, but I didn't enjoy it as much as anything else in the series. Now I'm moving on to what might be my favorite book. And that's Where the Drowned Girls Go. This has Cora, who we met in other books, and she is going to the sister school. So we're finally being introduced to the other school that exists. It's kind of a contrast to Eleanor West, where people want to forget the worlds that they came from and just be able to move on with life, not thinking about going back or how it impacted them. This has a pretty dark intro because we know that Cora attempted to take her own life, and by drowning ended up in her like mermaid world. I do want the mermaid book. Like if we do get another fully in another world soon next, like technically I guess we don't know if there's going to be any books past book 8 because that's what she was on contract for, but I'm assuming there will be another 2-book deal and then another 2-book deal and then another 2-book deal. But I would love to get Cora's mermaid world, but I don't know if that's what we can expect, because a lot of times the little fantasy worlds we go off to aren't always the main characters from like the book before or even a recent book. Who we do meet at the beginning of this one is Antoinette, who's Cora's roommate, and she is the one who stars in the 8th book that is the only one I haven't read yet, and I'm so itching to get to it. These are also the shortest books in the series so far, at only 130 pages each. So I'm gonna fly through these. I'll let you know in a second if this is my all-time favorite or not. Confirmed, my favorite book in the series, Where the Drowned Girls Go. It's just a wonderful story arc and feels like kind of taking back power. And I know that is a theme in a lot of different stories, but this one, everything just happened exactly as it should. And I don't know what to talk about before getting into spoilers. The institute that Cora goes to is kind of like, feels like conversion therapy. And Eleanor doesn't want any of her kids going, but recognizes there is another place for them. But she doesn't fully understand what goes on at this school, clearly, because when Cora gets there, the limitations placed on her are obviously not anything that we know Eleanor to be supportive of. Basically what they do is they put you in the opposite environment than you're comfortable in. So they deny everything that you went through. And it's basically like if Cora thought she was a mermaid, they literally don't let her touch water. So there's a pool at the school. She's not allowed to bathe. She has everything stripped away from her that they know her to love and to make her feel safe and comfortable, but it's to wipe her memory of the life that she lived before. It's not a spoiler to talk about the fact that that is a negative thing, and all of the characters throughout the story realize the situation at this school isn't safe for them. It's not good for most of the people who are there, and so they want to fight against that. It's wonderful, it's sad, it's brave. A bunch of characters like kind of come back into the story. You revisit a lot of old faces, and it's fantastic. Getting into spoilers, let's run through everything that happened in here. So Cora goes to Whitethorn, and there we find out that Reagan is also there. She's the one in this one, and she has denied the existence of the horse world, and she's about to graduate. And before she can graduate, we find out that she didn't actually forget anything, and she admits that she still wants to go back to the horseland. So all of her progress is gone. And so Cora and Sumi shows up at the school. Sumi is the most fantastic character of this book. The way she just inserts herself into this school to save Cora, and how everyone was working together to get her there, and then they want to like break Reagan out. It's just such a good collaboration. There are so many characters who get introduced in this one. We had Emily, who very much intrigues me. I feel like we're gonna get an Emily book one day. I think the main descriptions we get of her is she has dark skin, she moves like a dancer, she's nice. The world that she comes from, it's Halloween every night, and there were scarecrows that like could talk to her. Another girl we get is Rowena, but her world, all it said about her is the world is made of lava. She was saying like the floor is lava, but it was real. And she comes from a veil of clocks. She went in when she was 6, she came out when she was 12, but no time passed, or not very much in the real world, and her parents like didn't believe it was actually her because she's suddenly 12. Then we have Stephanie, who's described as dainty, pale, swan white hair, and she came from the world of the dinosaurs, and at the end of this book she goes back to the dinosaurs. Reagan's there, Sumi shows up. Sumi decides at the end of the book, the door to confection opens, and she decides she's not gonna go, and she's gonna live with Eleanor West and all of these kids for a while longer. So that's really beautiful. And then when they all come back to the school, they like take down Whitethorn, shut it down. The teachers have been like kind of bewitched to be there. And there's this really interesting element where characters are forgettable. So it's like that whole thing, like Addie LaRue, where you have a curse put on you, where everyone who meets you forgets you. And there's even a girl in here, one of the other characters, who doesn't have a name the entire book until the end. And she comes from the world of the rats, and she doesn't have a name, and she can't remember it, or she can't speak it out loud. And so everybody kind of gets their name back by the end of the book. And her name is Marion. They called her Minnie throughout the book because she was from the rat world, but her real name is Marion. And I felt like that could have been like a twist, like her name got revealed and it was a character we already knew from a different book, but no, she's just Marion. And then the end, when they get back to Eleanor's home, Cade like comes running out of the door, and there are multiple people who are arriving back at the house, including Sumi and these people who are going to save Cora. And obviously Cade and Antoinette were both working together to find Cora because she left with no notice. She just told Eleanor she wanted to go somewhere else. Eleanor sent her away. And Antoinette's whole thing, who's going to be in this book, is she can find anything. Like, she loses things and finds things. That's her whole shtick. So she's the one who finds Cora. But Cade obviously had a hand in that. And when they all come back to the school, Cade like comes running out the door and swings around Cora. And she said at the beginning of the book that they were like flirting, but she didn't know if he was really flirting with her. And I feel like they're going to be together someday. When Cade takes over the school, it's going to be like him and Cora in love. I just feel the vibes. So with that book done, I failed the goal. I did, I sure did. Well, technically, here's my loophole. I completed my reread within 72 hours. I even filmed right when it turned to noon because I had just completed Where the Drowned Girls Go. But yeah, I did not hit all 8 in 72 hours, but I'm gonna read this now. I'm itching to get to this because we just got introduced to Antoinette. I feel like this one is gonna be really sad because it's about losing and finding things, and it talks about losing your childhood innocence. So I'm sure this one is going to hurt. So I'll check in with you maybe at the halfway point rather than the very end, because this is my first time reading this one. I have no idea what to expect. All right, I don't know if it's because I've been watching like sentimental TikToks today, or I just put on like my instrumental playlist and it's very like moody, but the author's note made me cry. The author's note is it's making me cry. So that's my update. 5 seconds later. Oh God. Apologies for the lack of updates while I was reading. I was enamored. I'm finished now, and it is going in this spot, 4th. It was wonderful. And before I get into the plot, I just want to mention to the people who might have happened to see this video that I feel very, what's the word, vindicated? Justified. Because basically I do this cover prediction video. I talked about the trends that happen with these covers. So any of the stories that take place in like the now storyline, in Eleanor West's home or wherever the kids are going on their little adventures, there's a door in the middle of the cover. It is the most prominent thing. It's right in the center. It looks like a traditional door with the doorknob and the wood and the frame and all the stuff. They all have the door in the middle. The stories that take place in the other worlds, it is door-like, but it's in a tree. It's a different door. It's in a trunk. It's clearly a portal, but it's not a door. It's in this tree. It's not a door. So when I doodled and predicted the cover, which was an awful representation, this is stunning. But I was so confused because there's a door. Yet this is the every other book, which takes place in a magical world. We're following a girl we do not know. And now that I've read it, and if you read the synopsis, again, understanding what you understand the book to be, it's because we're actually in a nexus, and she stays in this place where there are many doors to many different places. So like all of these ones, she is technically in the real world, and we're looking through the door into the portal world, but we're not in the portal world. So this has that vibe. And you can see that the magical world is around the door, but this is both the magical world and not the magical world at the same time. So that's why it's a little bit different of a vibe, but kind of fits both of them. I know people are concerned about me giving any spoilers for this one because obviously a lot of people haven't read it yet. It just came out. If you've read Where the Drowned Girls Go, you know where Antoinette ends up. She is with Cora, and this is her backstory. So we know how it's going to end, but we just don't know exactly how she gets to that school, and that is explained. And we have like very brief cameos, more so just mentions of other characters we've seen in other places in the series, but there's also the introduction of many other character names and this whole history to this shop of the lost and found. I thought it was beautiful. It had really fantastic messages. It was hard to read, hard to get into. It's sad for a while, and then it's beautiful. And as we find out in many of the other stories, everything may look so perfect on the outside, but everything that you do, there is a price involved. And that's a lot what this has going on for it. Briefly getting into spoilers, and then I'm actually going to check in with you tomorrow because I just remembered I have some short stories to read and I know someone's going to ask. Also, Tor sent me this. I don't know if this is available anywhere or if you can read it online. It's called Skeleton Song. So I'm going to read these this evening, tomorrow, and then do a final check-in. So as this talks about, she loses her father dies, her mother marries another man, and he is not good. He's giving very bad vibes to Antoinette, and she runs. And she steps through this door into this like thrift store, and in there are these weird characters. There's a bird who talks, there's this older woman, and there are various doors that show up for her and she can enter, and one of them is into this market. I don't know if it's a goblin market or just some other type of market, but she ends up going in and does all these trades, and she kind of stocks the shelves in this thrift store that you can see like on the cover here. And there are various shelves of all of these things, and at the end you find that she has her own shelf basically in the shop, and she has a little jar of her teeth, and at the end she realizes that she's living in the body of, I think it was like a 14-year-old or 12-year-old. Meanwhile, she's supposed to be like 8 because only 2 years has passed since she entered the shop. And there's this whole story that happens where she finds a journal, and it's from like the original girl who ran the shop, and various other people have come in and lived in the shop, and she's like trying to warn people that you're going to lose your childhood when you spend too much time here or you do something wrong. Like, everything has a price. I think when she opened one of the doors, because like people will come through the doors, they'll be looking for something is lost, she'll help them find it. I think Jack and Jill made a brief cameo, and then when she eventually leaves the shop and goes back to her home, her family doesn't recognize her, but like the woman next door brings her in, I guess recognizes her, knows what's going on, and she's like, oh, my daughter Angela and her friend Serafina, I sent them to this school, so you should go there with them. So that's how she ends up in the school system. The people introduced in here, we had her stepdad Tyler, the shop owner Vanetta, and the bird named Hudson. And then there's a guy in the market named Seikos, and he like helps give her a tour, and he was really fun. Then there's a girl who comes in looking for a cat. She got described really interestingly, but I don't think we've met her before, and she didn't have a name. Then we have this like moth butterfly fairy kind of girl who ran the shop originally. Her name was Eladina. She had a sister, Cyan. She had a friend named Eater, and then a girl named Anya came into the shop afterwards and I think ran it. And it's just like this place for abused children to come and be safe, and you're not supposed to spend too much time there though. So again, a whole list of characters we could get future books from. Last check-in tomorrow. Here we are for final thoughts. The short stories, I'm not rating them, but I liked Juice Like Wounds, which gives the backstory of like Mockery Moon and Lundy from In an Absent Dream. There was a battle, there was a monster, it was interesting, and it gave some context that I wanted, so that was really good. In Mercy, Rain is about Jack and Jill's world and has Alexis involved, and it's kind of an origin story, but it is rehashing a lot of things we kind of already knew, so that one didn't feel as special. And then this one, Skeleton Song, is about Christopher, and it is a love story between him and the like skeleton princess. And I know throughout the series so many people's favorite character is Christopher, and that's whose world that they want. I never really felt that way, but after reading this just little mini love story, I do get the hype now, and I want Christopher's story. This is how I would rank the series. My favorite is Where the Drowned Girls Go, and then In an Absent Dream. After that, it's Every Heart a Doorway, Lost in the Moment, and Found. Though I almost feel like those two could swap. Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which I still love so much. Come Tumbling Down, which I still love so much. Beneath the Sugar Sky, and Across the Green Grass Fields. I kept my rating for every single book, and the newest one was a 5. So like, everything was such a win. As far as the stories I want in the future, I thought that I would leave this reread thinking about the worlds I want to visit, because here are the worlds we got introduced to that like I'm down to go back to. We have the Halls of the Dead, we have Prism, which is a fairyland, we have Mariposa, we have the Moors, we have something called the Web World, we have Confection, the Goblin Market, Hoofland, there's a Rat World, there's like a Halloween kind of world that I want to go to, the Vale of Clocks, I don't know if that's what it's called, but like it's like a location within one of these worlds. There's a dinosaur world, there's the trenches, and there's the drowned world. And the way we got introduced to all of these worlds is we do have a character at some point who has been in each of these lands. All in all, we got introduced to about 20 characters, at least thoroughly enough to know the world that they came from, either in Eleanor West's home or the sister school. And we visited 4 of those characters in 4 of those worlds in these ones. Now the next one should be, if there is a future book, should be back on like a quest with Eleanor and all of the kids. So I have no doubt that we'll continue to get introduced to new characters who are in the school. One character I'm expecting to come is Layla, and I'm interested in her past history in confection. But if we ever visit another portal world, I want to go see Cade's origin story, obviously, Eleanor's, but are we ever going to get Eleanor's, or what's the plan for that? I don't know. I think Sumi's origin story is something that everyone is kind of looking forward to. Though we've been to confection now a couple times, I feel like Sumi's story would probably be later in the series if that's planned. I think at the top of my list would be Cora's origin story, Cora's world, and Christopher's world. Though we know so much about them already, I don't know if those would be planned, because oftentimes we visit a portal world of a character we barely know at all. So if that is a continuing trend, then I want to go to Seraphina's world. Seraphina is such a background character, but she is referenced quite a few times. She comes from a world that is nonsense, high wicked, and high rhyme. She's known to be this like mean girl and the most beautiful girl you've ever seen, and I'm just interested to see the type of world that she comes from because it hasn't been named. And I think it's like beautiful people are drawn there and then they get more beautiful when they arrive. It's referenced Helen of Troy. If you finish the series, I would love to hear who you're most intrigued by, a character you would like to see, or the quests that you think the children will go on in the future, because I can predict the portal world, but I can't imagine what other storylines are going to happen in the school. So if you have any theories or thoughts about what you'd want to read or what you think is to come, please pick up the series. If you watch this whole thing and you haven't yet, I would absolutely recommend it. I know that throughout this reread, a lot of people have reread it with me. Brie did actually vlog it. I thought I would note. I'll link down below her video when she posts it. I don't think Meg finished the series yet, but I know she's doing a vlog for her patrons. And there are some people who read it with us who didn't enjoy it. So I know it's not for everyone, but I know that I would still recommend it. I really can't wait until Liam is old enough that I feel like passing it along to him, and it's something that he could really appreciate and enjoy. I really just want her to keep writing this series, and the only way to make that happen is to get people to continue to pick it up and read it and post about it. So that's me contributing. I had such a good time. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.